Alright, so I'm joined again by my buddy Paul.
Hey, hey.
Hey. As many of you expected, he is joining me again for my X-Men First Class review.
I'm the mutant expert.
Yes, he is. He is the, what do you call it? The superhuman aficionado? Is that what we coined you as? Or was it the mutant aficionado?
It was superhuman.
Okay.
Mutants are my specialty. It's what I do.
He's the mutant aficionado. We'll just call him that. So...
If you're born with powers, I know about you.
So, we're back with X-Men First Class, and I gotta say, I really liked it.
I really, if you ever ask Will, I kept saying, this is the movie that I'm excited to be disappointed at, and it blew me away.
For someone who isn't a big of an X-Men fan like myself, I really liked it. For someone who is a massive fan of them, you liked it.
I did.
And that's the biggest thing you can say about this movie. For a general fan, it's great. For even a hardcore fan, it's great. Mm-hmm. And that's probably the best thing you can say about it.
It was just the realism behind the movie, the way they made it. It wasn't exactly a superhero movie. The whole thing, there was a lot of very strong emotion, a lot of very strong character development.
We'll get into the finer points about it in a minute, but what we wanted to, stress, of course, this is supposed to be a prequel. We'll debate that a little bit more later. But because it is... This is a story about mainly Eric and Charles. Mm-hmm. It's essentially their origin story. And one of the things my friend brought up, one of my fellow friends at the theater, he compared it this way, and at first I kind of thought it was kind of a heavy-handed comparison, but it kind of makes sense. It's kind of like the telling of two different ways to come to the same conclusion, mm-hmm. where these two guys came together from two different paths, mm-hmm. two extreme different paths, mm-hmm. to the same outcome, which is trying to help mutants, except that they come to a different conclusion at the end.
Absolutely. It's very much Martin Luther King versus Malcolm X.
Exactly. That was the comparison he made. Martin Luther King versus Malcolm X. The two different origins coming together to try and find the same cause, but again, finding a different conclusion from that.
Right.
Now, the sort of the movie we see... we basically see the first scene from the first X-Men, which is in the concentration camp in Poland. When they remove Eric from his mother, it really is just the opening scene from X-Men. Yeah, except recast. Yeah. And so it goes from that to Westchester, New York, where we see Charles. Right. And he runs into what he thinks is his mom in the kitchen, which turns out to be Raven. Right. Finds her, stealing food in the kitchen. He says, "You never have to steal again." She looks like a gnome. She did look like a gnome. It was weird.
When I saw that in the preview, I was like, oh, this is going to be terrible. It's young Charles and a gnome. This little naked
it was a quick
girl.
scene, though. It was harmless.
Yeah, it was
a funny scene. And from that point, we see them, essentially grow up. Right. Instantly. We see Eric become like this... what I thought was like a James Bond character, where he basically is going out and performing espionage trying to find these Nazis. I'm going to go more for Jason Bourne. Okay. Only because he was more solo and he was out for one cause. Yeah. But yeah, exactly. He was very much an agent for himself looking to get revenge. Mm-hmm. And had all the means to do it. Yeah. We then cut back to Charles getting his doctorate from Oxford. Mm-hmm. He becomes a professor in genetic mutation. Mm-hmm. And it's at that point he meets... Moira McTaggart. She says, I've met these mutants in Las Vegas. I need your help with genetic mutation. They're essentially recruited by the CIA. Right. They meet Beast, right. Who is... they out as a mutant. Who's out as a mutant. And it's at that point they discover Cerebro. Which Henry built. Yes. Shortly after, I think it was shortly before that, they run into Eric when Eric is trying to attack Sebastian Shaw for the first time. Right, and nearly drowns. Yes, and it's at that point that the team building starts. Right. Once they find Cerebro, it's all about bringing in mutants to. At that point, I don't think they really knew what they were trying to do with it. Mm-hmm. I think the CIA was trying to build their own little Team X. And Charles basically says, "Hey, Shaw has friends, Eric. You're going to need your own friends." He says that at one point. Right. And that's really the only reason Eric stays around. Yes. He knows that he can't fight this guy by himself. Right. He tried to pick up a submarine by himself before. He can't do it. He needs help.
Right. So getting into the character lineup,
it starts off with Angel. That's the first one they recruit.
Angel Salvatore.
Mm-hmm.
She's a character who was created by Grant Morrison within the last decade. She's essentially a human insect. She has insect wings. Mm-hmm. She can fly.
Spit acid.
I think in the comics... I don't think in the comics she could spit acid. In the movie, she needed some form of offensivity. But then in the comics, she also laid larvae. Which...
Really?
Yeah. she was, for all intents and purposes, a human insect.
Okay.
I mean, she looked human, except for the wings. In the comics, really interestingly enough, in the comics, she was abused by her father. Like, beaten and just tormented. And she's only a teenager. In the movie, she's a stripper. And I remember making the joke to my boyfriend that, you know what, this is where she would have ended up had the anyway. So, the next one they pick up is Alex Summers.
Mm-hmm.
Alex's mutation is to absorb radiation of just about any kind. Solar, gamma, really anything. Store it in his body. And then if it builds up too much, it can just go off like a bomb. In the movie... It shows him almost hula hooping the energy.
Yeah, almost like a boomerang of sorts, like wielding it around his body and then flinging it with his arm.
Almost as if he's releasing it and trying to grip it, but having an issue, and then he really just tries to throw it into a direction, which it usually doesn't go. The next mutant they find is Darwin.
Who can adapt to survive, is what they say. If he goes underwater, he gets gills. If he gets struck, he develops rock skin. Yeah.
Right. In the comics, he's introduced in the Deadly Genesis storyline when we discover that there was another X-Team years ago that died. In order to survive then, he turned himself into energy and stored himself in somebody's body.
Wow.
And then when that person came out of hibernation, he then exited the body. Then they found...
Banshee.
Whose power is simply to scream.
Yeah.
He can emit supersonic sound waves, which he can use to...
Shatter glass, or
concussive forces, or...
Supersonic, or... Yeah.
Right. They use it to help him glide on sound waves, which the way they did that, I was actually very impressed.
So to that point, Charles and Eric have their team. The kids start screwing around, having a good time. They're finally meeting their fellow mutants for the first time. They start having fun. And Eric and Charles are like, you're not here to have fun. You're here to be part of a team.
Right, you're here to mold the future of the species.
But they would have none of that. They just want to...
they want to hang out with people
exactly.
like themselves. So then they're attacked. Well, not even attacked. The CIA is attacked by Sebastian, who wants to offer them a chance to join him.
While Eric and Charles are away in Russia trying to find Emma Frost.
Correct.
Emma Frost, which, by the way, she's a fucking Bond villain in this.
Essentially, yeah.
She's dressed like a Bond villain the entire time. Always in white, and always like in a skimpy outfit. When I saw her, I thought of Pussy Galore from Goldfinger.
Essentially. Essentially. She's a big hooker.
Yeah. Everything about her either screamed kinky, or James Bond, or bondage at one point. So, weird.
In the comics, the less fabric she's got on her body, the better.
Yeah.
So the lineup that Sebastian has, for those of you who don't know Sebastian Shaw, he's the leader of the Hellfire Club. He absorbs kinetic energy and uses it to make himself stronger, or can release it in kind of almost explosive blasts.
Yeah, like controlled bursts. Yeah.
Right. The rest of the Hellfire Club team, you had Emma Frost, who was a psychic, and she can shift into a diamond form. They had Azazel, who in the comics is not a member of the Hellfire Club, has never been associated with the Hellfire Club, although I did like that he was in it. He is Nightcrawler's father. He is red, not blue. He teleports, and in the comics, he is an ages-old mutant, one of a species, the name of which I can not remember to pronounce, of demon-looking mutants that fought angelic-looking mutants. Which it is said that Angel, Warren Worthington, is a descendant of.
Interesting.
So that was kind of a cop ploy in the comics to try to make it so that Kurt was a demon. But and then the final member of the Hellfire Club, who is also not a member of the Hellfire Club in the comics, was a mutant named Riptide, who in the comics spins really fast and throws ninja stars. In the movie, he creates tornadoes, which I liked better because it wasn't stupid looking.
And they never actually said his name in the movie, which was kind of interesting. I couldn't figure out who he was. You said Riptide. I was like, I don't know who that mutant is, but he essentially is basically...
He doesn't have a single line in the entire movie.
No, he doesn't. But the thing was, I looked at him, he was basically just like a second-degree Storm. That's what they make him into.
He was essentially just the muscle.
Yeah.
So that was the lineup they picked, and I mean, with the exception of the Beast, there wasn't a single character there who belonged in the original lineup for the X-Men. I'll even give them Havoc. If they played the summer story right, they could have Havoc.
Mm-hmm.
But when I read this lineup, I was incredibly angry. Although, actually, I'd even give them Banshee because Siren is in X2 and 3.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd even give them that. But other than those two characters, initially when you and I were looking at this and we did the last review,
the superhero preview,
the superhuman preview. I mean, you remember me saying, and I was like, this lineup doesn't make any sense.
Nope.
The suits look ridiculous,
Nope.
and I was like, this movie is gonna bomb.
And yet, it all worked.
It worked fantastically.
And getting back to one of the points I was mentioning earlier, one of the things that makes this movie work is the style. Mm-hmm. They created essentially a 60s style to this movie. The way it was shot, the way it was edited, the way it was filmed, and it has a really vintage feel to it, which we haven't gotten in any of the X-Men. They've all essentially been the same movie, cookie-cuttered over and over, with the way that the stories were told. Mm-hmm. This is the perfect team-building movie.
Yes.
It really was. And that style combined with the 60s style, where it was, espionage / James Bond / team building, worked perfectly for this.
With superpowers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And for someone who had basically given up faith on this series, this has renewed my faith in the X-Men series. It really has.
You had made a mention at the last review that you said Fox has to do an X movie every 4 years or something? Or
every 2 years.
Every 2 years?
20th Century Fox has the rights to X-Men so long as they make a movie every 2 years. So in 2013, theoretically, we'll get another X-Men film. Whether or not that's going to be another Origins, or whether or not it's going to be the new reboot, remains to be seen. We don't know what they're doing yet. And that's where I want to get off on this point, and this is the big debate online. Is this movie a prequel or a reboot?
Now, there's a lot of things that lead you in either direction,
mm-hmm.
and Mike and I have actually had several conversations about this, having only seen each other maybe once or twice.
Once or twice after the movie, yeah.
In the original movies, there's not a single mention that Charles and Mystique know each other.
Yeah, and which makes it interesting because just last night I was watching FX and they had all 3 of the movies on, which made it great because I could go back and watch those and see what points were differentiated from First Class. And if you remember, in the first one, Mystique breaks into the Institute and hooks up that black thing to Cerebro that almost kills Charles. Would she have done that if she grew up with him?
See, now, by the same point, in the comics, Eric and Charles are best friends, and though I don't know that Eric would ever, with the exception of Ultimate Magneto, would ever actually kill Charles, he does make a lot of attempts on his life.
Mm-hmm.
And it, knowing how strong he was and knowing that the team would bring him back somehow,
mm-hmm.
she may have, knowing that it wouldn't be fatal, but... And mind you, she had 30 plus years to go very sadistic.
Mm-hmm.
So,
True enough.